Love Me Not on Radio London, 4:42. That's the time. Shay here with you till 6 p.m. Now, it is this part of the show, vitally important part, where we get the latest news in technology, or as our resident friend here on Radio London likes to say, every story is a social media story. I'm joined live in the studio with founder of We Are Rocket. He is our resident social media and technology expert, James Erskine. James, great to have you back in the studio.
It's really nice to be here. Hi
Thank you for coming in. And did I get that right? Every story is a social media story?
I think so. I think every story can be viewed through the prism of social media. There's always a way whether social media is initiating it or reacting to it, I think. So,
I think you're right in that, in the way that we consume our news now as well. There's no denying it.
No.
There really is. And actually, I was looking at an array of these stories, which the first one I'm very intrigued by, because this is a conversation I'm having a lot with parents, at the school gates. Let's talk about parents needing advice on managing social media. Give us some context on this story then.
Well, there's a business called MediaSmart. They're a great organisation, and they have a dual role of informing children about social media and digital things, and also encouraging young people to consider working in the industry of advertising. And they did a piece of research, and they found out that 65% of parents felt fairly confident in managing screen time, but 70% of parents would like to learn more about safety tools and features on platforms. So they started working with TikTok, and they created a number of videos highlighting the resources that are available across different social media platforms. And it was a really interesting piece of research. I'm a father of a 13-year-old and a nearly 11-year-old, and I know just how much of a minefield it is to navigate. And there were some other interesting things that happened since I was last here chatting social media.
Yes.
One is there was a piece of research that Deloitte released where Gen Zs, so young people, over half of them would favour a social media ban for under 16s. And the other thing, we know there's a social media ban coming into operation in Australia. Well, New Zealand and the New Zealand Prime Minister has also proposed a social media ban for under 16s. So parents need help. Some people are saying under 16s can't handle social media. So it's a really interesting debate.
I feel like this year, the year of 2025, because we are now halfway through the year, James, every conversation when it comes to social media somehow does revert back to that hit Netflix show Adolescence.
Yes. Yeah.
And it has sparked so much debate and conversation, but fundamentally it's woken up parents' eyes to what social media is like for children in schools in the UK.
Yes, I'd agree. I'd also reference, there's a really good American documentary that went behind the scenes of what children are doing on their phones and how they're advertised to across social media. And the end result of that documentary was the children went without their phones and without social media for 30 days. And now this was an American documentary, but I still think there are parallels. One of the children that was profiled in that documentary asked, if we don't put it on Instagram, did it really happen?
Gosh.
Isn't that unbelievable? So there is a perception that if you're not talking about things on social media, that they're not even real. That's an incredible place we've been. And you're right, adolescence was a real waking up points. I mean, I'm really lucky. My little boy goes to a great school, but they actually ran a workshop for parents on positive masculinity. So the counterpoint to toxic masculinity.
Was that off the back of Adolescence?
Pretty much. I mean, look, I don't know whether the parallels were drawn, but it certainly covered a lot of the same themes, and it educated parents about the language that they might use, the influences they may consume. And look, it's worth saying, dangerous content has always been available to young audiences.
Sure.
But it's always been harder to find. And We've got the UK Online Safety Act coming into play very soon, and this is a year of change. But it is interesting. I do wonder, taking a helicopter view, whether we'll look at this stage in our growth, in our history, and think, were we all crazy? Were we all mad to let young people have access to that level of unregulated content?
So interesting. So I remember a friend saying this to me a couple of years ago, actually. And it was a really simple thing, James. If we were all out at dinner and the mums, you know, had put the children on another table and there was a tablet and they were all just watching what we thought was just a really innocent YouTuber for children.
Yeah.
And that was fine. But I'll never forget this kind of comment that she made that's really stuck with me. She said, you know, would you allow your child, no matter how old they are, whether they are 7 or 17, would you allow them in a room with a stranger of 1,000, you know, a room full of 1,000 strangers to say whatever they want whenever they want? And obviously we all said, well, no, of course not. You would never do that. And then her response was, well, why are you allowing that digitally? And I mean, gosh, that really hit home.
It's a really good point. It's a really good parallel. And there are some regulated online environments. So YouTube Kids, the specific YouTube Kids app, is regulated. It doesn't have adverts.
Yeah.
And there are only, if you like, licensed broadcasters that show stuff on there.
Okay.
The actual YouTube, anyone can upload a video.
Anything.
And of course there are guidelines and there's technology to make sure people aren't uploading anything lewd. But if it's opinions, exactly as your friend's analogy, if it's voices, then any voice can be heard. So it is a minefield.
It completely is. I mean, you've mentioned New Zealand, obviously, Prime Minister proposing social media ban for under 16s. The other element to this, Gen Z's favouring social media ban for under 16s because they themselves are hitting a digital media kind of fatigue, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, again, they said that the other part of this Deloitte study, it only came out yesterday, I think, so it's pretty hot off the press, but 1 in 5 consumers have deleted a social media app in the last 12 months, rising to 1 in 3, 29%, among Gen Zs. So that does point to an element of digital fatigue. And it's funny, going back to school children, I mean, what is an acceptable amount of screen time? What counts as screen time?
Okay.
There's no kind of standard here. There's no, my kids get an hour a day, pretty much, in bursts, 3 20-minute bursts on their phone, right?
Yeah.
So that's the older one. Now, what's funny is other kids in his class get a bit more. Some get less.
I see.
And you just don't know where the formality is. The other thing is, and I've used this analogy before, I think it was during COVID actually, my darling daughter was watching a video on YouTube of how to create origami. And a particular origami stunt thing video.
Okay.
And my son was watching a video from the Sidemen. I don't mind the Sidemen, but my son could not understand why my daughter's screen time was acceptable and why his was not.
I see.
So sometimes screen time can be valuable. There's some times where, in the same way we might have listened to something enriching on the radio, there's some experiences on social media that aren't nonsense, aren't bubblegum, aren't harmful, and there's no way of understanding what is.
It's interesting because obviously you add into the context with a lot of schools nowadays, it goes hand in hand, having technology, doing homework online. You can't really even be in primary school without having some form of a tablet, even as young as 7 years old.
Yeah. Maths homework is done on iPads.
Everything.
Yeah, completely.
Which is quite interesting. Let's move to TikTok then, within this context of social media, because they're working to do what? Make screen time safer but more balanced? Give us context on this story.
Yeah, that's right. So effectively, they were basically part of this partnership with MediaSmart. And one of the things that they wanted to do was educate parents. Well, just recently, what they have done is they have effectively worked to make screen time safer and more balanced for families. And they are bringing in, this is from an Australian site, a raft of new features to effectively help discipline people around screen time.
Okay.
So I think that's a really good use for us, grown-ups.
Yeah.
I think it's great to be told you are looking at TikTok for too long.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is this will inform families how to control screen time. So set limits on specific apps and use specific controls. And I think that is the way that we are going. I was on this station talking about when Instagram introduced teen accounts. So almost you could say cynically that some social media platforms are getting in ahead of regulation.
I see.
But actually, I think encouraging responsible use is really important. And it has to be said that TikTok and MediaSmart were behind this campaign around digital literacy. And you've heard me talk before. I think that's really important. I think teachers should be on board. I think parents should be on board. And I think children should be on board.
Let's move, shall we, to the next story then. Thank you for that, because it's always a vitally important one. The blurring of lines between different online and social media sites. What's going on here?
Well, this was, I thought, fascinating.
Okay.
Channel 4 are now broadcasting some of their shows on Spotify.
Gosh.
And at the same time, and this has been going on a while, but I tried to pull two different things to make the point. Do you know where one of the biggest sites to consume podcasts is?
No.
YouTube. So YouTube
Really?
is huge for podcasts. Spotify is going into video. And it doesn't quite make sense when you think about it on the surface.
Yeah.
Now, what's amazing in the podcast space, and podcasting is huge on YouTube, it's the top destination for podcasting in the US, especially for video podcasting. It's the most used platform, surpassing Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
It is.
Part of that reason is YouTube can work well in the background. Part of that reason is the proliferation of video podcasts. So when you're on a social media platform, how many times now are you served a snippet from a podcast?
Yes.
That's because they've made a video version of that podcast. So there's a real blurring of the lines now between almost the delivery system in Spotify and YouTube and the media. What is a podcast? Because years ago, if you were to ask me to define a podcast, I'd say a short snippet of audio. It's now almost outgrown that distinction. It's now video as well. And lots of the most successful podcasts are video, hence YouTube. And Channel 4 have always been an originator. So them popping up on Spotify is a really interesting development.
Do you think it's going to happen for other broadcasters?
Yes. I would not be surprised.
Right.
I mean, we know how important it is for the BBC to engage with young audiences. Spotify does have a free model, so you can get there. You do get some adverts. You don't get adverts around BBC content, of course. And it's really interesting. I do think other brands will start looking. They've had video ads and music videos on Spotify for a little while. I think it will be really interesting to see what other content pops up on Spotify, because I do think video could be a play for them. Just so you know, you can charge more money for a video ad than you can for an audio ad.
Okay.
So that could well be the commercial
Side of it.
Yeah.
I see. And so just funny, because there's such an array of stories here today, which I did want to get your thoughts on. Give us more details around the rise of Substack in the context of the digital world.
So this is really interesting. Effectively, Shay, back in the day, journalists would have to work for a heritage media brand.
Sure.
The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Times, the Guardian, the BBC.
Yeah.
Journalists now do not have to. They don't need those gatekeepers to reach audiences. They can publish their own content. Substack is about to move into the audio space. It's mainly written and video now.
Sure.
Patreon is another example of being able for individual creators to engage directly with journalists. Tina Brown has a Substack. She's a huge American journalist.
Right.
She estimates she earns 10 times more money by going direct to her audience on Substack than she did when she was working for legacy media brands.
Goodness.
The other thing that's interesting is people are looking for voices where they can't find those voices in legacy media. So since Trump was re-elected, Substack have seen an additional 1 million subscriptions to their various different newsletters. I would say, I was at effectively the kind of Glastonbury Festival for social media marketing people a couple of weeks ago. It's called Social Day. It was a 3-day social media festival and it was amazing. And I was asked the question, what era of social media would you go back to? And I said, I'd only go back 6 years. And the reason is I loved Twitter. And Twitter has really changed.
Yes.
What I would say, Substack now is not a million miles away from where Twitter was a little while ago. It over-indexes on opinion, on influence, on journalists, on politicians. And I'd really urge people to have a look at Substack, find a creator they like, engage with them on a free basis and see whether they want to spend some money directly with the journalist. It also could have an effect on London journalism. There's a brilliant journalist called Jim Waterson who started a Substack called London Centric, and it's all London journalism done through Substack. So it's a really exciting opportunity for fledgling digital content creators.
What was his name again?
Jim Waterson.
You're going to have to try and get him on and speak to him.
Oh, yeah, you should do. London Centric. He used to work for The Guardian.
Yeah.
He's done some really good exclusive work around Lime bikes. He's a really good thinker, and I love the fact that he's making a success on a small level servicing London audiences.
Part of this then the fact that journalists can have that freedom and opportunity as opposed to just being perhaps tied down to one particular, newspaper or platform or even channel for that matter.
Completely. I think that's a real direction of travel in social media, and it's what it's done for journalism and content. Whatever you think of him, Piers Morgan launched Piers Morgan Uncensored as part of a News UK broadcasting moment.
Yes, he did,
He's since taken it away. He now owns that YouTube channel, and he is purely broadcasting on podcasts and on YouTube, and he owns that content. He is now the media owner. There's no paymaster, if you like.
Sure.
So it's an interesting direction of travel, and you're exactly right to point out. Imagine, Shay, I'm sure I know you're a producer, I know you get on brilliant, but imagine if you could wake up every morning and think, I can say what I want today.
Yes, I'm going to go out and it's a different world in a sense.
It's a very different world.
And the way in which we consume it goes back to our original point, doesn't it, actually, James? The way in which we consume media, news is ever changing.
Completely.
And it's quite something to try and stay on top of all of it, which is why we have you. James, it's always a pleasure having you here.
It's been great to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Coming back, our social media and technology expert, James Erskine. You can find him on X, formerly known as Twitter, on James Erskine. Real pleasure to have him here, and a lot of food for thought. I'm sure we'll be unpacking some of those stories when I'm back with you next week. Right, time now is 5 o'clock. Let's get the news headlines on BBC Radio London with Will Schindler.